strength training is a gift for my future self as I age. There's so much research in regards to bone health, muscle health, brain health. The list goes on for women and strength training. Aging, it's inevitable, and I don't want to make it harder on myself, which is why I lift relatively heavy weight. Welcome to the Dangerous Women podcast, where the intersection of fierceness and femininity fuels empowerment. Our goal is to provide women with insights to unleash their power. Grounded in the 7 principles of self-confidence, we guide women to embrace their duality, delicate as a flower, yet powerful as a bomb. I'm your host, Colleen Conlon, inviting you to join me as we explore topics on health and wellness, empowering you to embody the essence of your dangerous woman. When I'm not hosting the Dangerous Women podcast, I'm spending the majority of my time as a virtual strength and conditioning coach. I initially began strength training with the kettlebell, and that opened the doorway to training progressive calisthenics and with a barbell. Before I began strength training, I did every type of workout under the sun. HIIT, running, cycling, yoga, dance, bar, jump rope, you name it, I did it. I went all in on using these forms of exercise personally, and I taught them at some of the top big box gyms in New York City. I have stuck with strength training for 3 reasons. Number 1, strength training helped me learn the lesson that I am limitless. It's a mental weekly practice for me to continue to develop my grit. If you haven't listened to that first podcast episode, go check it out because it's strength training that gets the credit for me being where I'm at today. Number 2, strength training has been the one type of training where I've seen the most change in my body without having to do extreme dieting to achieve the aesthetic I want. And number 3, strength training is a gift for my future self as I age. There's so much research in regards to bone health, muscle health, brain health. The list goes on for women and strength training. Aging, it's inevitable, and I don't want to make it harder on myself, which is why I lift relatively heavy weight. I have a lot of opinions on fitness as a whole. I think it's possible to find the benefit to any type of training depending on the person and their goal. I think what gets missed sometimes is the person's goal and their fitness approach just not matching up. For the longest time, I wanted to look toned. I grew up watching my mom teach group fitness classes and lift 5-pound weights, and she did look toned. I thought that that's what I was supposed to do in order to achieve that look, just like my mom. I learned, though, that there's so much more that goes into it. There's healthy approaches and non-healthy approaches. There's genetics. There's listening to the masses who have marketing initiatives. And then there's science that's not always super sexy. So today I want to take the time to explain what strength training is, the types of strength training that there are, what the outcomes are depending on what a woman is choosing to try in regards to strength training, regardless of using free weights, kettlebells, or a barbell. And then I will wrap it up with action steps to help you begin. So strength training, also known as resistance training or weight training, is a form of physical exercise designed to improve muscular strength and endurance. It involves the use of resistance to induce muscular contraction, which builds the strength, anaerobic endurance, and the size of skeletal muscle. There's a lot of different modalities that you can use. When I say modalities, think dumbbells or free weights, think machines, think kettlebells, think barbell, think body weight. Then there's specific types of strength training that will help you accomplish specific adaptations. So think of strength training kind of like an umbrella term, and under it we have power, strength, hypertrophy, and endurance. So when we look at power, the goal is to increase explosive strength and the ability to exert force quickly. When we look at strength, we're looking at maximizing the amount of force a muscle or muscle group can generate. So for both power and strength, the reps and the sets, they're on the lower side. Think 1 to 6 reps per set with something that's heavy. And heavy is like 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max. And then in regards to the volume, this is going to be somewhere typically between like 3 to 5 sets per exercise. In regards to the rest time, think 2 to 5 minutes. That's a long amount of time for rest to allow for a full recovery before you go again. In regards to the type of exercises, think compound movements. So a compound movement would be something like a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, an overhead press. Compound exercise, think engaging multiple muscle groups to allow for heavier loads. The other thing we can think about with this is Olympic lifts. So think exercises like snatches or cleans or jerks that specifically are developing explosive power. So some techniques you might see people talking about or using are stuff like maximal effort method, meaning regularly lifting maximal or near maximal loads to increase neurological adaptations. Another technique would be a dynamic effort method. Think using lighter weights with high velocity to develop speed and power. And then the other thing you can think about are plyometrics. So incorporating explosive movements like a jump squat or a box jump to enhance power. Now, in regards to the specific adaptations to both power and strength, there's an increase in neural efficiency and motor unit recruitment. So think of your brain as a smart boss. And when you practice moving and lifting things, your brain learns how to send clear and quick messages to your muscles, like giving super smart instructions to your workers. Okay. The other thing that happens is enhanced muscle fiber recruitment, especially with type 2 fast twitch fibers. So let me give you a little more background on that. Imagine your muscles are like different kinds of workers who do different jobs. So some workers are really good at lifting heavy things really fast, and some are good at working for a long period of time, but they're just not as fast or strong. So we have type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. Type 1, also known as a slow twitch muscle fiber, these are like the workers who can keep going for a long period of time. Like when you go for a run or a walk, you can do it for a long period of time. They're not super strong and they don't get tired quickly. And then you have your type 2 fibers, also known as fast twitch. And these are like really strong workers who can lift heavy things quickly. They're super strong, they're super fast, but they get tired quickly. So when we're training this way, we are enhancing our recruitment of those type 2 fast twitch muscle fibers, the ones who can lift heavy things quickly, but they get tired quickly. And the last specific adaptation is improved intermuscular and intramuscular coordination. So this is like your muscles, think of them as like friends. They're learning to play together as a team. They learn how to help each other and work together really well. So the way it works is kind of like teamwork and being able to practice together as a team. So when you move, different muscles need to work together. So for example, if you're going to throw a ball, your hip, your torso, your arm, and your hand muscles, they all need to work together to make a good throw. And then the more you practice as a team, the better your muscles get at working together. So that is all that's going down when we are training in that power or that strength place. The next type of training that I want to talk to you about is hypertrophy. So think bodybuilders here. The goal with hypertrophy training is to increase muscle size by enlarging muscle fibers. So for this, think of moderate reps, like 8 to 12 with moderate weight. So the volume typically is around a 3 to 5 set range given an exercise. Your rests are going to be somewhere between 60 to 90 seconds to maximize muscle pump and fatigue. And in regards to the exercises, there's going to be a combination of isolated exercises and compound movements. So both single jointed exercises, think bicep curl, where I'm in isolation, and a multi-joint exercise, again, think of your squat, your bench press, or your deadlift. In regards to different techniques that would be used, you might find something like drop set, so continuing an exercise to failure and then reducing the weight and continuing for additional reps. You might see people using supersets, which is where you're performing 2 exercises back to back without rest, often targeting either the same or an opposing muscle group. You also might see people utilizing straight sets, which is when you do a specific number of repetitions of an exercise, you take a break and then repeat the same number of repetitions within that rep range for X amount of sets. Each set is the same without necessarily changing the weight. Now, in regards to the adaptations that we see from hypertrophy training, number one, there is an increased muscle cross-sectional area. So basically, as your muscles get bigger, they allow for you to perform activities better because there's more muscle fibers working together, so you can produce more power. Next, there is an enhancement of muscle glycogen storage. So when you exercise, especially doing things like running or lifting, your muscles need a lot of energy. So having more glycogen storage means you have more energy available to keep going. What would life be like if you could get that toned look? You could have physical superhuman strength by training with just 2 kettlebells at home. What would happen if you were on a program that strengthens self-awareness and courage so that you can develop a deeper connection and trust to self? What about this? What if you could be in a community with other women where you are encouraged to be assertive and resilient to build mental and physical strength? If you're waiting to hear what the offer is, this is it. Swing to Snatch, a 13-week kettlebell intensive, is my signature course that empowers women to get started with kettlebells. Work with me live in a virtual container guaranteed to grant you kettlebell queen status. To learn more, visit www.colleenconlon.com. And then the last big piece to hypertrophy is the increased metabolic stress and muscle damage. And that's what leads to growth. Then the last piece of the puzzle we're going to talk about is endurance training in regards to strength training. So the goal of endurance training would be to improve the ability to sustain prolonged physical activity and increase muscular stamina. So the reps are going to be on the higher side. Think like 15 to 20 plus reps per set with something that is lighter. The volume is going to be somewhere between, on average, like 2 to 4 sets per exercise. And then the rest intervals are going to be significantly shorter. Think 30 to 60 seconds because you want to maintain an elevated heart rate and fatigue muscles. The types of exercises you're going to find here are going to be things like push-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges, performed for high repetition. So you're going to need to use lighter weights to perform more repetitions of some of these traditional exercises. Some of the ways you might see somebody implementing this would be circuit training, and that's where there's a series of exercises performed in a sequence with minimal rest in between, and that enhances cardiovascular and muscular endurance simultaneously. You might see people taking an approach with functional training. So think about exercises that mimic real life activities, focusing on improving endurance in practical tasks. Something like a farmer's walk looks a lot like carrying groceries in, or carrying a baby, or carrying a suitcase. And then the adaptations that are taking place here are increased mitochondrial density and oxidative capacity of muscles. So mitochondria are these tiny structures inside of your muscle cells that make energy. They're like power plants in the muscles. So more mitochondria means more power plants to make energy. There's enhanced capillary networks within muscles. And that means better delivery of oxygen and nutrients to your muscles. And then last, there's an improvement of muscular efficiency and endurance, meaning your muscles can do more work using less energy. So each type of training requires specific approaches in order to achieve the desired adaptations. So whether you're trying to develop maximal strength, increase muscle size, or improve endurance, balancing these three methods can help create a well-rounded fitness program tailored to individual goals. One of the biggest mistakes I see people new to lifting make is not going heavy enough. So there's a little bit of a caveat. You need to know what you're doing first. And you don't know what you don't know. And certain types of training and modalities are harder to figure out on your own, so that you are training safely and efficiently. When you look at a program, and let's say it's a hypertrophy program, and you know in your mind 3 to 5 sets, 8 to 12 reps, okay, you should pick a weight where 1, you have proper form, and 2, the last 2 to 4 reps are really fucking hard. If you aren't challenging yourself, your body isn't going to change. But to go heavy enough with the right form, it can feel really intimidating, which is why in the beginning, it is especially important to work with a coach. I remember when I first started, I didn't go after heavy enough weight. My coach would suggest using something heavier. He would, be really curious to be like, oh, what do you think you should use? And then he would play the game of showing me, actually, I think you should try this. Now, this is where realizing you are capable of more in any aspect of life really starts to come into play in regards to strength training. Sometimes in order to rise, we need the expert to come in and help guide us, because we don't really know what's possible, especially if we're walking through uncharted territory. Now, we're gonna make a little pivot, and I wanna just share some jargon, some strength training jargon with you that you might start to come across. You might be noticing when you scroll the gram or you are getting started on a program, just to kind of give you a little education on some pieces that you might not know. So when we hear reps, it's short for repetitions, and it means the number of times you do a specific exercise in a row without stopping. An example might be doing 10 push-ups, meaning you are doing 10 reps of push-ups. The next one is sets. So sets is referring to a group of repetitions. So you do a certain number of reps, rest, and then do another group. So for example, you might read that as doing 3 sets of 10 push-ups means you do 10 push-ups, rest, repeat, 10 push-ups, rest, and then do 10 push-ups one more time. Rest period. Rest period means the time you rest between sets or exercises. So for example, resting for 1 minute between sets of push-ups. The next one, intensity. Sometimes this will even be listed as RPE, and that means how hard are you working during an exercise. It can be measured by the weight you lift or the effort that you put into it. And when we talk about RPE, a lot of times we'll see that on a scale of 1 to 10, and it's up to you to figure out where you are at on the scale. Nobody can feel for you, but depending on your program, depending on what adaptation you are going after, that's how you know, oh, I'm working at an intensity that is going to allow for this adaptation to take place. And if that feels like it's kind of getting lost in the sauce, again, this is another reason why it's really important to work with a coach as you begin your strength training journey. The next one is volume. So volume means the total amount of work that you do, and it's usually calculated by multiple sets and reps. So for example, if you do 3 sets of 10 reps, your volume for the exercise is 30-ish reps. Progressive overload. This is all over the internet. So progressive overload, it sounds more complicated than it is. What it means is gradually increasing the weight, the reps, or the sets to make your muscles stronger over time. So if you start by lifting 10 pounds, you might increase to 12 pounds after a couple of sessions. Hypertrophy, we already talked about this one, but again, what it means short term is growth and increase in your muscles. Strength, again, we spoke about this one. Basic terms, it's the ability of your muscles to lift or move relatively heavy weights. Endurance, again, we spoke about this one, what it means. The ability of your muscles to keep working for a long time without getting tired. I have a couple more for you. Compound exercise, we touched on this one before as well. That's when we are doing exercises that work multiple muscle groups at a time. Examples would be squats, deadlifts, because they're working your legs, your back, and your core all at once. An isolation exercise, exercises that target one specific muscle group. A great example to that are bicep curls. Bicep curls are isolation exercises because they mainly work your biceps. Form. When you hear somebody say form, what it means is the correct way to do an exercise to avoid injury and work the muscles properly. And then the last one is failure. What does failure mean? It means reaching the point where you can't do another rep with good form. For example, like doing push-ups until you can't do one more with proper form. Once your form starts to break down, that is your sign to stop. And I think for folks who really want to just like keep pushing and they really want to hit like the highest reps that are listed within their rep range, just because you are given a range, it doesn't mean you need to max it out every single time, especially if your form is breaking down, because that's how injuries occur. Understanding these common strength training terms, they will help you follow workout routines and improve your training efficiently. It's like learning the rules of a game so that you can play better. And some modalities have very particular rules that you need to learn before you can play the game. So for example, hardstyle kettlebell technique, it's very nuanced, but it really does set you up for a lot of success in any other type of strength training. Training with a machine, there is a lower risk of injury, but it's more isolated work than compound work. So you would need to devote more time potentially to training that way, depending on your goals. Something like Olympic lifting, I would say, is like really technical, like the most technical type of strength training. And for that, like I wouldn't necessarily encourage someone to start there. The other thing to keep in mind with training like that is you also need a tremendous amount of good mobility in order to be successful. Now, in regards to starting, regardless of the modality, regardless of your strength training goal, the initial 6 to 8 weeks of most people starting a strength training program, you will not see much of a physical change. And that's because during this initial period, there's a neurological adaptation that has to take place. Capillaries becoming more dense and more mitochondria is building in the cell, regardless of the modality or type of strength training that you're working with. So if you're listening to this and you started something and you're getting frustrated because you haven't seen immediate results, know that change is happening below the surface. It takes time. The best thing you can do is stay consistent. Now, let's talk game plan for how to get started. Number one, you have to figure out the modality that you are most interested in learning to use. Some will take longer to figure out than others. So what I mean by that is you need to learn how to use a modality before you can necessarily start training with it. So be okay knowing that you need to learn the rules before you can play the game. Second, figure out your goals. Do you want to be able to lift something really heavy? Do you want to build muscle? Do you want to increase endurance? Certain training styles can adhere to all three, whereas some are primarily focused on one or two of those goals. So for example, I start all of my clients with hardstyle kettlebell technique. Hardstyle alone would fall into the strength and power category, but the way I coach it, I do hit hypertrophy and endurance work with my clients too. Whereas something like bodybuilding will live in hypertrophy and to an extent the endurance category, whereas something like powerlifting would fall truly into that strength category. So there's not so much crossover. So figuring out what do I want and making sure I am going to begin a strength training program that is going to help me get those results. And then the last thing is get a coach. Your coach can be in person, they can be virtual. You could do private training. You could be in a group setting. I think apps are great if you already know what you're doing, but if there isn't a way to get individualized feedback, I would skip it. You don't know what you don't know, and having that guidance will be one of the best investments. Now, in doing that, couple tips. Make sure whoever you hire has knowledge. Do not hire someone just for their body or just for what you can see them do from a performance standpoint. You want to make sure you are hiring someone where you can see the results they've helped get other people, and you want to make sure to ask them if they believe they can help you. At the end of the day, you need to be the one who's doing the work, but if they aren't confident that they can guide you, you're better off working with someone who believes they confidently can help you. And for anybody who is interested in getting started with me and the kettlebell, you know where to find me. Thank you for listening to the Dangerous Women podcast. If you had any groundbreaking takeaways from today's episode, please tag us on social at the Dangerous Women podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe below.